all your years of paying tax, you helped us overcome our darkest hour. You, along with every other loyal taxpayer, helped build this nation. Thank you for every life you saved and for every risk you braved, for giving our future generation a healthy start. When you saw many of our vulnerable communities, you provided for them. When you saw our healthcare workers on the front lines battling COVID, you rose to the occasion and gave them the tools to save lives. Without your tax compliance, we wouldn't be able to fight a good fight. Thank you for contributing to the important services our vulnerable communities rely on every day. To all taxpayers and traders, continue to pay your tax because it matters to millions of South Africans who depend on it. Your tax matters.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to everyone that's joining us this afternoon. My name is Nomonde Mhlongo, and I'm the head of King Shaka International Airport. That's where I'm deployed. And I'd like to welcome all our stakeholders, all our senior leadership, and every other person that has taken the time to log on today. It is very much welcome. Thank you so much for leaving everything behind and coming through and joining us as a SARS family in sharing this information session. I hope that this session will be very integrated and that we will share information back and forth as long as we come out of this session all, under one understanding. Before we move on to further issues on our program, it is important that we allow Mr. Cassius Sintumule to just welcome us and do the opening address and allow us to understand what exactly did we come here for and set the tone for what will be happening throughout this afternoon.
Thanks, Program Director. Good evening to everyone. May I kindly acknowledge the delegation from government agencies who are very critical in facilitation of movement of goods and people through the respective ports of entry. It is worth noting that as government agencies, our role and responsibility is underpinned by Chapter 3 of South African Constitution that encourages all spheres of government and all organs of states to cooperate with one another in mutual trust and good faith by supporting, assisting, and consulting one another on matters of common interest. May I further acknowledge the delegation from the neighboring countries, Republic of Botswana, Republic of Zimbabwe, and Republic of Mozambique, whom we not only share borders. Importantly, our relationship is bound by our long history, joint members of African Union, Southern African Customs Union, and Southern African Development Community. Furthermore, from a customs perspective, we are signatory to World Customs Organization. As stated in terms of WCO vision, bringing customs together for a safer and more prosperous world. Borders divide and customs connects. May I acknowledge all travel and tourism partners, esteemed tour operators and audience, members of the diplomatic corps and individual travel. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed, greetings. Globalization has created opportunity for social cohesion and participation on economic activities, including tourism. Ports of entry traveler experience through inter-agency process value chain plays a critical role to attract investment and tourism opportunities. Whilst we acknowledge the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, there is an indication of gradual increase of economic activities, including movement of people and goods through our ports of entry. To support this view from a modality perspective, ORTIA daily process an average of about 14 regional flights and 11 international flights. Under normal circumstances, it's worth noting the increase of volume of traffic through our ports of entry, especially during festive and Easter holidays. The festive season for the current year is planned for the period the 10th of December 2021 to the 10th of January 2022. This brings us to the following question. What do we want to achieve by the Traveller Week? Aligned with SARS Vision 2024 Strategic Objective 2, that seeks to make it easy for taxpayers and traders to comply with their obligation. It is our knowledge and understanding that in building a trusted relationship with our travel, it remains our responsibility to empower you with information. Guided by our strategic objective that acknowledge the importance of work with and through stakeholders to improve the tax system, it's worth noting that we operate in an ever-changing environment that always suggests proactive leadership. Leadership that also acknowledges the important contribution by all stakeholders based on our individual experience, including best practice from other countries. Today's session will also provide as our critical stakeholder opportunity to contribute during the panel discussion. On that note, may I hand over to the program director, confident that it is indeed going to be quite an exciting and very informative session. Thanks, back to you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sintumule, for that warm welcome to all of us. We certainly are clear now on how everything is going to roll out, and we certainly feel very much welcome, even our other stakeholders that are joining us today. Without further ado, maybe let us lead on to the next keynote speaker for the day. We have Mr. Bongani Dlamini Usibalkhulu. He's going to be addressing us today on the meat and the crux of what we will be discussing today. Mr. Bongani Dlamini holds a diploma in education and training development with over 20 years experience in the field. He joined the South African Revenue Services in September 2009 in the then Customs Academy as a specialist research and development. During the time at the Customs Academy, he played a major role in the planning and delivery of training for the Customs Modernization Project. He's currently the manager in learning and development, in charge of the SARS Institute of Learning's training material development as well. Bongani is accredited to deliver the Strategic Trade Controls Enforcement module for the World Customs Organization. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Bongani Dlamini.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to our webinar this evening. I will be taking you through the presentation on our customs requirements for travelers. Please sit down and relax and enjoy the ride. In my presentation, I will cover the following topics. I'll give a bit of introduction, and we'll talk about the COVID-19 protocols. As you know, we are going through the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll then take you through the traveler process, which involves also duty-free allowances for travelers. I will inform you about restricted and prohibited goods. I will inform you about carnets that are available that one can use to bring equipment into the country without paying any duties or levies. I will talk about the immunities and privileges that apply to diplomats and head of international organizations. And then I'll talk to you about payments and VAT refunds. And right at the end, I'll then inform you of what could happen in instances of non-compliance. We have different modalities that we operate at. being land, which is the borders, land borders through to our SACU member countries, and also including Mozambique and Zimbabwe. We have air travel, as Mr. Sintumule had alluded to, that we have got different international airports around the country. We also have sea, which is around the coastline from Cape Town through Kruger and up to KwaZulu-Natal. And then we also have rail, which we still operated by Robos Rail, taken through tourists to the Republic of Namibia. So in a nutshell, a traveler arriving in South Africa needs to pass through customs control. And during that period, they may be questioned or searched. Their luggage may be also physically searched or put through a scanner. You need to be aware of the restricted and prohibited goods so that you don't find yourself on the other side of the law. You need to complete what we call a traveler card, which is a self-declaration to us on what you have on yourself. Once you have declared, you may be liable to pay duties and taxes. If there's any contravention found, you shall be fined or prosecuted accordingly. I just need to bring it to your attention that we also have our sister government departments that also operate at these ports of entries. We have the South African Police Services, obviously, to have law and order, and obviously they have other goods that they control in terms of bringing into the Republic. We have the South African Reserve Bank, which is there mandated to see to it that no large amounts of money either come into the country or leave the country. We've got the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, who are solely there to manage our resources in terms of agricultural resources that either come in or go out of the country, be it meat products or plant products and so forth. We've got the Department of Tourism. They are there to welcome you and give you all the information that you may need to navigate your stay within the Republic. We've got the Department of Health, who are playing a critical role during this pandemic and also controlling some of the items that either get imported or exported. We've got the Department of Home Affairs, who enforce our immigration laws, see to it that everybody who passes through our ports has got the necessary documentation, and also give them allowance in order to come in or decline if needs be. So let's quickly talk about, before obviously you come in, I need to give you the information that you need wherever you're watching from outside the Republic, the information that you need if you decide to then visit the Republic. You will be subjected when you enter to a health screening at the port of entry, to questions that have you been exposed to COVID, or are you feeling well, and so on and so forth. You must provide a completed traveler health questionnaire, and you need to also produce a polymerase chain reaction or PCR test results, which is negative. And this should have been obtained 72 hours before you left the country of origin. In the event that you cannot give us the PCR test results, we'll then subject an antigen test on you at your own cost. Should then, during the antigen test that is conducted, you're found to have COVID-19, you'll be required to isolate at an approved facility at your own cost for a period of 10 days. Exemptions on producing the PCR test are there according to the regulations. Normally, we exempt cross-border flight operators, airline crews on official duties, children under the age of 5 years, daily scholars and teachers will be exempted from producing the PCR test. In leaving the Republic, going to other countries, always make an inquiry on the requirements of the destination country. They may be different from ours this side. So please always make sure that you find out where your destination, what are their entry requirements when you get there. You must produce an exit screening questionnaire. And if during the screening a traveler is found to have exposure to COVID-19 or has those symptoms, they'll be subjected to medical examination, which may include the formal testing. For more information, there's that link. Obviously, this presentation will be available on YouTube after the webinar. You can always refer to it and get more information as to all the directions about COVID-19. Now that we have cleared that, we can now talk about what happens when you come into the Republic. The first port of call when you get to any port is to get to immigration. They will then process your travel document, and if you're allowed in, then you will need to come report to customs, either by choosing the red channel or the green channel. I'll explain to you a bit about the red or green channel. Leaving the Republic, the first port of call is to come through to customs. You might have some valuables on you that you need to declare. Then the customs officer will be able to help you there. Once you're done that, you'll find your way to the immigration office, who will then process your departure with your travel document. You can then proceed to security checkpoint and onto your way to the other country. Okay, let's look at the traveler process. So every person that enters the Republic needs to declare all quantities and values of goods in their possession. This is done by completing a traveler card, which you'll obtain either during flight if you are in an airline or when you get to the port of entry. The customs officer that you approach with the traveler card will capture that information that you have completed on the traveler card, and also ask you more questions so that you can do a verbal declaration that the officer will then capture on the system and then print a form for you that is called the traveler declaration. Please, when you complete the traveler card, let it be in English caps. You can use a blue or black pen. Minors should always be helped or assisted in completing their traveler card. Each traveler, if it's in a group, must sign the traveler card. So if it's a group of 4 in a vehicle, each one has to do their own declaration. And we only accept the original traveler card, not photocopies. You then are allowed to then proceed to the green or red channel. I kept on talking about the green and red channel. What does that mean? Let's have a look. The green channel says you are assessing yourself and you're saying, I have nothing to declare. I am in possession of goods that fall within the duty-free allowances, and I'm not in possession of any prohibited or restricted goods. So you're doing that self-declaration yourself, or self-assessment, shall I say. You can then proceed to the green channel. It does not, however, mean that you are not liable to be stopped by a customs officer to confirm that indeed you are green to continue. However, on the red channel, it means you saying that I've looked at what I have, or even more importantly, if you are unsure whether you need to declare whatever you have in your possession, it is always advisable to go into the red channel, where you'll get the help and advice that you require from the customs officer that you'll be dealing with. If you have any prohibited or restricted goods, you need to go to the red channel. Any goods intended for trade, any foreign currency or South African banknotes or Kruger Rand coins equivalent or more than 25,000 Rand, any goods in excess of the duty-free allowances. I'll explain to you in a few slides what the duty-free allowances imply. Any valuable goods that needs to be registered for temporary importation or exportation from the Republic. So the last part is basically to say, if you are living and you've got a nice expensive camera, that it will be advisable that you declare it, so that we know that indeed you did take it out when you initially left the country by the time you come back. This will then assist you in having a smooth return and not being asked to confirm whether the camera was bought wherever, therefore duties might be due. Right. If you are leaving the country and you have, as I just mentioned, you are leaving the country and have goods that you want to bring back, you need to register with us for the personal effects for temporary exportation. Registered personal effects exported in exempt from duties and VAT provided that there were no alterations done. So we are saying you took the camera out, did it come back in the same state that it left? If it did not, or there was repairs or alterations, the duties are then due on the cost of those alterations or repairs. If you are coming into the country and you have in your possession goods that you want to take out with you when you leave again, it is important that you come to us, and then we'll capture the details of those goods so that, again, when you leave, we know that you had brought them in initially when you came into the Republic. The declaration in this instance, the inward one, is valid for 6 months. If you find yourself that you're enjoying the Republic more than 6 months and you still want to stay longer, it will be advisable that you approach us again so that the temporary importation permit can be extended. The 6 months limitation doesn't apply to crew members, students, and travelers who stay for work purposes within the Republic. Detain goods. So you might wonder, why would I have goods that are being detained? So the first reason would be if you are unable, after we deduce that and confirm that there are duties due on whatever items you are bringing, and you are unable to pay those duties or VAT, those goods can be detained until you are able to raise those duties and VAT and pay them, and then the goods will be released to you. If the imported goods are prohibited, it's a no-no. You are not ever going to get them. They shall be detained and then destroyed. Compliance requirements with other government departments are not met. So as I said initially, I showed you who our sister government departments that we work with that have control over all these things. So for example, the Department of Agriculture, if they check whatever plant product that you brought and decide that it might bring diseases to our agricultural sector, they may detain those whatever items that you brought into the Republic. Commercial goods that have not been commercially cleared may be detained until they have been commercially declared. Goods that are suspected of undervaluation, unaccompanied baggage or lost property that still needs to be declared. Goods that are suspected of being counterfeit or illicit. Normally we work with brand holders here to say we suspect this is a counterfeit, whatever brand it is. We'll call those brand holders that own the brand. They'll come and confirm with us whether it's counterfeit or not. If it's until then, those goods will be detained. Right. If we cannot confirm that you bought the laptop that you left within the Republic, we may detain it until you have shown us the proof that it actually was bought within the Republic on your initial departure from the Republic. Right. Now let's look at the land process or land modality process. Most of it's the same, whether it's land, sea, or air. It's only a few differences here and there. So I'll go through this one to start with. Everybody, as I said, needs to complete a traveler card. Also, if you're driving a vehicle that is registered in a non-SACU country, you will also have to declare that, and will issue a temporary importation permit for that vehicle. You will hand over the passport and your traveler card to the customs official. As I said, once they've captured the information on the traveler card and also allowed you to do a verbal declaration, they'll print out a form for you, which is your declaration form. If there's any payment that needs to be made, you'll then make the necessary payment. If at any stage some of your goods are detained, you will need to insist on a detention notice that the officer needs to provide to you. Informal traders, if they bring commercial goods, we advise them to go via clearing agents for them to assist them in clearing those commercial intended goods. And they cannot use a universal code that we used to use to do a declaration with us anymore. So just to touch a bit on the subject of the non-SACU vehicles, the requirement there is that obviously you will need to have a passport in order to come into the Republic to start with. You need a certified copy of the vehicle registration papers if in your name. If the vehicle is not registered in your name, you need to have a letter of authority from the registered owner giving you permission to drive the car through into the Republic. You need the letter of authority from the bank if the vehicle is still being financed by any financial institution or a bank. The other modalities, the air and rail, everything is the same as we had discussed with the land. The only difference here will probably be that, say, for example, with air, you have your duty-free shops there that you can purchase duty-free products, which we'll talk about when you talk about the duty-free allowances. The sea modality, also the same or similar, but the only changes here that one needs to be aware about is, for example, if you take a cruise from Cape Town to Durban or the other way around, that cruise basically does not leave the waters of the Republic. Therefore, you are not allowed to bring, or you are not allowed duty-free allowances. Any duty-free stuff that you buy during that voyage, when you come onto land, we might then assess you to pay duties on those items that you might have bought. Travelers in transit, these are travelers that are booked from outside, obviously outside the Republic. They land at one of our international airports here, and they are destined for another country. So if they're destined to another SACU member state, they don't need to go through the customs processes as they will go through that when they get to their destination country, which is another SACU member. However, any other destination, you'll have to go through the customs processes. You're not allowed to leave the transit area in between flights. Luggage usually gets transferred to your next flight. Notwithstanding that, we still reserve the rights to actually search that luggage before it gets transported to the next flight. Right. So in a nutshell, valuable goods, my advice to you is when you leave South Africa, always come to the customs window where we will capture all those valuable details, the details thereof, whether it's a serial number, and make sure that when you come back, you are able to produce that declaration that shows that the goods were initially removed from the Republic. If it's your first time coming into the Republic, also advisable to come to the customs window where we'll issue you a temporary import permit, and then make sure that you pay any provisional deposits if they may be required. These deposits will then be refunded to you upon the departure within the 6 months. Some travelers do bring commercial goods. However, as I mentioned about the detention, if you do bring commercial goods and have not commercially declared them, we'll detain them until you have done a commercial declaration with us, which is assessed at our compliance centers. And once all those processes have been concluded, the goods can then be released to you. Just a note that commercial goods are those goods that are intended for resale in South Africa. Some people, as I said, do bring them on as carry-on luggage. Right, now let's talk about the duty-free allowances for travelers. So they're divided into three, basically. So it's what we call a duty-free allowance. I'll explain it to you in the next slide. There's consumable goods, and then there's handmade articles for commercial purposes. Right, so duty-free allowance, we are saying to you, you can bring any goods that are below 5,000 Rand in terms of cost, and those will be, there won't be any duties or tax that you need to pay. However, please note that cruise, whether flight cruise or sailing cruise, their limits are based on or are limited to 700 Rand. This duty-free allowance is only allowed every time on a cycle of 30 days. So you can claim it today, you can't claim it again next week, but after 30 days being completed, you can then claim it again. However, SACU member states or travelers that are coming from SACU member states, their limit is at a higher 25,000 Rand. Right. Now, I mentioned to you 5,000. Now you might wonder what happens if I bring anything that is, say, for example, 10,000 Rand. So what we are saying is, if it's whatever you brought is costed you 10,000 Rand, we'll remove the 5,000 Rand that you are allowed under duty-free allowances, and then the rest of the 5,000 will charge you a flat rate of 20% on the extra 5,000 Rand. However, you are able to then decide and tell the customs officer, no, I don't want the flat rate. I don't want to be assessed on the flat rate. Can you please calculate the duties on the individual item that I brought? Then the customer is able to go and look into our tariff book and confirm what are the duties due for that particular item that you bring. Please note that crew members are only limited to 2,000 Rand. Okay, as we said and we have explained, the traveler card, the customs officer will capture the traveler card. The flat rate allowance is only applicable to international travelers and not travelers from SACU member countries. As I said, it's as with the duty-free allowance, it is only allowed in a 30-day cycle. Let's talk about consumable goods. Travelers are entitled to import free or duty or tax consumable goods. Crew and pilots and master pilot are not entitled to any. Consumable goods in excess may not be claimed under the duty-free allowance. So you can't go over what you are allowed to bring and say, but I still have 5,000 in the duty-free allowance. No, that is not allowed. We will bring duties to account for whatever extra that you brought under the consumable goods. The consumable goods are obviously allowed in addition to the duty-free allowance, so they are on their own. Whether you had depleted the 5,000 Rand duty-free allowance, will still allow you to bring the consumable goods. Tobacco and alcohol allowances are not allowed to persons under the age of 18. So you can't bring 2 bottles of spirit and register one on your son's traveler card who's 15 years old. That is not allowed. So what consumables am I talking about? I'm talking about wine. You are limited to bring 2 liters of wine. Other alcoholic beverages, whether it's spirit, beer, or whatever it is, you can only bring 1 liter. Accompanied baggage, new or used goods up to 5,000 Rand, but obviously for SACU member state, it's up to 25,000 Rand. Pipe or cigarette tobacco, limited to 250 grams. Cigarettes, 200 sticks of cigarettes, that makes it a carton, usually. Cigars, only 20 are allowed. And then you're allowed up to 50 milliliters perfumery and 250 milliliters eau de toilette. Anything else above this, you will be charged or you will be asked to pay duties for. Handmade articles for commercial purposes. We do understand that some of the travelers from our neighboring states do make handcrafts and try to make a living by coming into the Republic and selling those articles in the Republic. So we are saying there to allow for business purposes, member states are allowed to import handmade articles of leather, wood, plastic, stone, or glass if the goods do not exceed 25 kilograms in total without the payment of any duties or taxes. These need to be declared on the traveler card, and the handmade articles are allowable once per person during the period of that magic 30 days. Additional information or additional restrictions. Every person traveling in a group, as I said, if it's a group of 4 people in a vehicle, every one of you needs to complete a traveler card and do their own declaration. minus, as discussed, needs to be assisted. You cannot pool the duty-free allowances. So what we mean by that, we're saying if there's two of you in a vehicle and you bring in a television set that costs 10,000, you cannot then say, I'm allowed 5,000 and my partner that I'm driving with is allowed 5,000, therefore it's 10,000. No, because you're declaring the TV to one person. You cannot share the TV. And these goods must be for personal nature and for own use or to be given as gifts. Continue with that. Any goods that are not compliant with the provision of the rebate items will be assessed as per that item that you bring in for duties and VAT. As I said, minors accompanied or not are also entitled for travel allowances minus the alcohol and tobacco products. Commercial goods carried on behalf of other people, repaired goods, processed goods, and goods do not qualify for any allowance. Right. Remodeled, processed, repaired, or exchanged goods, if they are remodeled, processed, or repaired, the duty is payable on the costs incurred while the item was being remodeled or processed or repaired. Exchange goods, these goods may qualify for duty-free allowance of 5,000 rand and then the freight rate after, depending on how much it costs. Returning residents must ensure that the goods in question are clearly described, and then they need to provide documentary proof that of these transactions, whether it was the remodeling, processing, or repairing of the goods. Oh, now we talk about prohibited and restricted goods. Okay, those goods listed there are prohibited. You are not allowed to bring any of those goods for any reason whatsoever. Narcotics, guns, full automatic military, or any pistol that does not have a serial number is not allowed. You cannot bring explosives and fireworks. Poison and toxic substances are also prohibited. Cigarettes, of which the mass exceeds 2 kg per 1,000 of them. Trademark, the counterfeit that we're talking about, trademark description and trademark in contravention of any act, that's your counterfeit goods. You're not allowed to bring any of those. Unlawful reproductions of any work subject to copyright. You're talking about pirated videos here, pirated DVDs are not allowed. And then last but not least, we're saying penitentiary or prison-made goods are also prohibited. Restricted, so these ones can be brought in with the necessary authority or permit. Firearms, all gold coins or ZAR banknotes or bearer instruments in excess of 25 cents, unprocessed minerals, animals, plants and their products, medicaments, and herbal products. So you can bring all these provided you have permission or authority to bring them. So you would have applied for that before you actually bring them. In the case that you did not, that's where the detention will then kick in until you are able to either get the necessary authority or permit, and then the goods can be released to you. Let's quickly talk about carnets. This is a mechanism of anybody bringing items into the Republic and avoiding paying duties and taxes. Usually these are brought in for temporary reasons. Okay, so they use this vehicle called a carnet. What is it? It's an international customs declaration document used for temporary importation and re-exportation of certain goods. How does it work? It is used as a customs procedure where you can temporarily admit goods into the Republic. In this instance, no payment of duties of import duties and taxes, no application of import prohibition and restriction. Goods are temporarily imported with the intention of re-exporting within a specific time period. There are two types of carnets that we have. We've got one that is called admission temporaire or temporary admission, which is the ATA carnet. We also have the carnet de passager and douane, which is the CPD carnet. These are usually applied for through the Chamber of Commerce in the individual countries that the person bringing the goods or items normally resides. The following are covered by the carnets: commercial samples owned abroad, with the purpose so you're bringing them to demonstrate them in the country for soliciting of orders. Say maybe it's a solution, a machine that you have invented, you want to come and demonstrate or show it off here in the Republic, you can use a carnet for that purposes. Goods for exhibition, fairs, shows, meetings, film crews, news crews with their expensive cameras can also use this vehicle so that we don't always require them to pay duties and taxes. There's another form of declaration for those things listed there that is under our section 38(1)A of the Customs and Excise Act with a form called DA 306 that needs to be completed in order to, for example, declare human remains from either one country to the Republic or from the Republic or outside. Okay. Immunities and privileges, these are given to a set of individuals, either ambassadors, high commissioners, consul generals, head of international organizations, diplomats, and consular officers. These immunities and privileges are given to these individuals by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, using the Diplomatic Immunities and Privileges Act 2001. We as customs do regulate the import, the clearance of goods imported for official use and goods for personal use. These may include vehicles, purchase of duty-free goods for special soap from special soaps for diplomats. Import duty is rebated on the basis of either certificate A or B being validated by DERCO. I'll go through about the certificate A and B in the next slide. If, however, the diplomats want to claim a rebate of duty and value-added tax, they will need to declare whatever goods they're bringing under our commercial process using the SET 500 form. The certificates, A, as it says there, official use by diplomatic and consular missions and international organizations, personal use by diplomatic agents, and also by consular officers. Certificate B is mostly used by for personal use of administrative technical staff at diplomatic or consular missions, and also for personal use for official or officially accredited to an international organization. Payments, we would like that you pay us with our currency, which is the ZAR, South African Rand. You can do the payment and with using an electronic fund transfer. You can use cash, you can use a credit or debit card, you can use e-filing, but always please insist on a receipt before you leave the control area. Okay, let's talk about VAT refunds. VAT refunds, so the Republic has got a VAT refund mechanism to refund the VAT paid on the acquisition of goods by persons visiting South Africa. As you all are aware, the VAT is paid at the point of sale. So wherever you are in the Republic, when you buy, you will add on whatever you buy a VAT of 15%. So if you do not reside in the Republic, upon your departure, you are able to then claim using regulation number R316 and claim that VAT. But there are limitations that I'll talk to in a moment. Who can claim? Foreign diplomats, tourists, non-residents of South Africa, and any other foreign enterprise. Just a three-step process. Make sure you've got the documentation. So when you buy at the point of sale, request a tax invoice. But if the purchase is more than 5,000 Rand, please ask the person helping you at the point of sale to also include your name and address on the invoice. Step two, You'll then present the goods when you depart, present the goods for inspection with customs, confirming that what's on the invoice is actually what you're presenting. Once you are done and the customs officer is happy, you can then go through to the VAT refund window, submit a claim to the VAT refund administrator. You will need a passport, a boarding pass, a tax invoice, proof of export, and any other documentation that the VAT refund administrator may deem necessary depending on your particular case. A VAT refund will only be considered if you are a qualifying purchaser. As we had mentioned previously, it's a non-resident of the Republic, a tourist or diplomat. The goods must be exported within 90 days from the date of the tax invoice. And the minimum that you will need to have spent is at least 250 Rand. The goods must be exported through one of our 43 designated commercial ports. So these are where customs is present. There are smaller ports that customs is not present. You cannot exit those goods through those non-designated ports because there's no way of confirming that the goods that you're taking are exactly as claimed in the invoice. Therefore, you need to use a port where customs is present. The qualifying purchaser must submit all the relevant original documentary proof in order to prove that the movable goods were exported by either road, sea, air, and or rail. The information about VAT refunds is displayed on your screen right away. As I said, the presentation will form part of the YouTube, and you can always access it at a later stage if need be. Otherwise, the best bet is the website www.taxrefunds.co.za. Now, almost there. Non-compliance. We've got in our Customs and Excise Act the penal provision, which guides us what penalties to impose for what contravention. Obviously, we all know failure to adhere to the provisions of the Act is an offense, which can lead to monetary penalties, criminal prosecution, or the seizure of goods, and or all of those above. What constitutes an offense? Failure to declare goods, the under-declaration of values, and the production of false receipts and invoices, which we have seen of late. The smuggling of goods subject to controls, those prohibited goods, if you're caught trying to smuggle them, big problem. Right, now in conclusion, I will always refer you to our, you can then find further information. For SARS, you can use the website www.sars.gov.za, and I've also listed some of the hotlines or contact numbers of our sister departments that we operate with at our ports of entry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. My colleagues will then take your questions after this. And Program Director, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Mr. Dlamini, thank you so much for that very in-depth presentation, very succinct, to the point, and thank you so much for leaving no stone unturned, as they say. As we move on with the program of today, I would like to highlight just a few issues that we did not highlight previously. We have a few questions that are posted in the chat box, but I would like to advise that all over and above the chat box, you can also just email us at questions@sars.gov.za, or alternatively at customsandexiseeducation.gov.za. So we will take the questions that we have at the moment in our chat group, but however, please feel free to continue because it's quite an extensive session. Please feel free to email us and ask more questions. I promise you that we have enough subject matter experts in our hands and present today that will be covering the whole aspect of what we are discussing today. Please be advised as well that this session will be led by Mr. G.M. Mugeri, who is going to be leading the discussions with 10 internal specialists from the South African Revenue Services. But however, we are privileged and honored today to also have representation from other government stakeholders. So everybody that might be involved in the processing of our travelers is present this afternoon, and we are very grateful for that. Let me highlight once again, ladies and gentlemen, our gratitude for being online with us today and sharing in this very informative session. And let me highlight especially those that are joining us from other African countries. It is a blessing to have you, our brothers and sisters. Thank you so much. I will hand over to Mr. G.M. Mugeri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director Nomonde. And thank you very much to Wongani for taking us through such a beautiful presentation, a very much enlightening engagement that you have just had with us. I would like to take this opportunity now to go into some interactions so that we can clarify some of the questions that we have received from our travelers and traders, but also most importantly, the aspects that apply, which are regulated by other departments that are available at the ports of entries. There is also our colleagues here who are joining us from the Customs Administration from Mozambique, who I would also like to welcome very much. The colleagues from Mozambique are not alone. We are also joined by colleagues from the CBRTA, which is the Cross-Border Road Transport Agency. We are joined by also colleagues from the Tourism Department, the Department of Health, as well as the Home Affairs Department. This is also to ensure that we provide you sufficient coverage in as far as the information that you need to know is concerned. First of all, I would like to welcome Chef Geni. Chef Geni is in Mozambique. In Portuguese, in English is Chief Geni, who is also joined by Chief Martina from Immigration. Chief Geni is from Customs from Mozambique. If you can come forward and greet the audience, and we take it from there. Can you take the floor?
Good afternoon to all.
Good afternoon, thanks. So yes, would like to give you an opportunity, Chief Geni, as well as Chief Martina, to take us through some important and critical information which travelers who are moving from South Africa into Mozambique must be aware of, which they must also comply with, both from immigration as well as customs. If you have any additional information over and above what we have shared, especially from a Mozambican perspective, I would like to now allow you to take the floor and at least give us a brief information which the traders and the travelers must be aware of. You can take the floor.
Good afternoon to all.
Good afternoon, thank you.
All the protocol observer. Regarding to the Mozambique side, I would like to present some few points that they are no different from what have been said on this beautiful presentation with the customs SARS representative that was here at first before me. Let's go regarding to the fiscal allowance from our side for the travelers. I will start giving to you what are our conditions, because also we have these as following. What are requirements for the allowance? Passengers who, for declaring travelers, passengers who have nothing to exceed on their own personal effects or travels allowance These are the ones which you have to declare, declaration from the travels. Have no commercial goods, have no prohibited or restricted items. It may take in a declaration to effect that they have nothing to declare. Other passengers and all crew members must make a complete declarations. It means that they have also to present themselves to customers if they have to declare something. Each one of them itself by their own. It is the same example by the TV presented with the past presentation. You cannot share a TV. You have to declare you own TV, and that is further on for the other good. If you are in any doubt as a complete declaration, you have to approach customs on any doubt for us to give you an explanation. What are the laws or requirements for it? And this is where it passes to a previous process. Your declaration might be a challenge, and your luggage may be selected for examination, whichever declaration you make. It is depends for the risk which we are going to achieve from first. Maybe it is going to be taken place from where you're coming from, where you passing through as transit and things like this. False declarations are given of offerings or bribes for the government, or it's what we call penalties. This is what they have to must be aware of. Otherwise, they'll be inquired for illegalities. Individual duties-free and fixed fiscal allowance are granted monthly in a respect of goods imported by travelers which are intended for a person or family in use. Let's talk about what are these products. In tobacco products, you got 200 cigarettes or 100 cigarilles or 50 cigars or 250 grams of tobacco processed. You got for alcohol drinks, 1 liter of spirits drinks, and 2.25 milliliters of wine. It means 2 liters and 250 milligrams of wine. Perfumes, you have to up to 50 milliliters of perfume or 250 milliliters of toilet water. You have other goods like it even must to exceed $200 by the rate of today. Up to now is what is the allowance. In cash flow, allowance to travel with the authorization which regarding to the government bank for Mozambique, we are now on 10,000 US dollars allowance on package. That is the most important point to know that. Exemptions, we have the exemption for the minors workers, which they got the benefits of once per month, they import goods for their family, not worth more than 300 rands. In medicals, we converted, they are able to purchase goods on about 15,000 meds per month.
Right.
Once per month, they have to bring goods for their family in order, or send to their family goods in order for 15,000 meds. Once per year, allowed to import one type of formal applicants or any kind of long-lasting households. It is what once per year, as when he is returning for the holidays or the festive season. So what happens? On the return for the country, at the end of the employment contracts, we got this. This is also regarding for the consular governments staff,
And the
which
diplomats.
are the diplomats. They also have almost the same treatment. They are allowed to bring the goods when they are returning with the end of the contract, complete the luggage. They got the free passage for all. What is the personal use, house belongings, and things that do not exceed the amount of 2,000 rands. This is what was in past, but now we are talking about 5,000 US dollars. Okay. In order to benefit from the exemption of the minors, must produce a purchase of goods in South Africa, a valid Mozambique nationality passport showing the records of this procession, and the state from South Africa authorities showing the length of part of the work in the mine. It means that for us to assure that he really was a miner inside South Africa, or he was observing work on a consular or diplomatic purpose, you have to bring something from the country which he is coming from and giving proof as it is.
All right.
Condition in terms of importation of a motor vehicle. We got a condition for that. To be a Mozambican, if you are to import, you must be a Mozambican over 18 years old first. It means that when you are a student or you are less than 18, you are not allowed of it. Living abroad or in a period beyond 1 year, it means that if you have been out, it must be on a period beyond 1 year. I think first I have to apologize. It can't be an eloquence or fluent in English, but we haven't provided a translator for this meeting. That is the point. I won't be trying my best to explain what we are doing this side. This is regarding for the allowance, and I'll continue as it is. Let me go for the next step. As prohibited goods, they are no different from what we have been mentioned before by the first presentation. We have goods which license is required from a competent authorities, which are arms, explosives, and fireworks, gold, silver, platinum, and coins or ingots from Mozambique Bank. The fire, explosive, and fireworks are from the Minister of Interior. Animals, skins, and parts of animal products, and their derivatives, the Minister of Agriculture. This is the required license. Plants, roots, and tubers, the also Minister of Agriculture. And medicines, we are Minister of Health, which is the required license, where the people must apply for them before they bring these goods to Mozambique. That's why we call it the restriction goods. The allowance of the currency, it's on a restriction also, import and export of currency. At first, before the pandemic, we have been and inflation, we have been working under 5,000 US dollars for us, but on these days, we are on 10,000 US dollars allowance for traveling. Okay.
All right.
Even for the particle, which is a valid goods, as I explained it before, where we got a list of it, like computers, watches, earrings, and necklace, which are personal belongs. like a photograph machine, as as an example. We also have a list of these items that are required to be done a simplified declaration on the time of entries or exit of country. This is a simple formula that is filled and where you describe all the details of what you are carrying, and we put it on account that on your return, you doesn't have complications on the declarations. According to these points also, some of these subjects or these items, they need to be on the correct license approval. Imagine if you want to export a firearm. You cannot export it without a license from Minister of Interior. So you need to do it. Even if it's your own, if you have an allowance to be a port of a fire gun, but if you don't have the allowance to take it out of the country, you cannot do it. So you have to deposit on the customs before you continue your journey on the at the border. That is the point. That are the points. Continuing to my presentation, I'm going to talk about effectively what happens at Resano Garcia. It's where I'm fit at the moment, and not speaking about all the process. I've explained it on generally, but let's talk about the road point, which is Resano Garcia border opposite Libombo. Okay.
All right. So Chief, again, so just to summarize, so you have explained the details in terms of the national requirements for people who are coming into Mozambique and who are coming going into South Africa. You have explained the details which affect the people who are working in South Africa and they are living in Mozambique, to say when they are returning, this is the kind of information. You have also touched information regarding the diplomats and office bearers in consulates and so on. You have also spoken about prohibited and restricted goods, and amongst those is also the controls around firearms and ammunition, that they are prohibited from being imported or exported, even if it's personal, unless the minister gives you approval. Now, when we go into what happens into Resano Garcia, I will ask that also you make it a bit brief, but over and above, if there is a website or anywhere where people can go and search for information, then they can go and find additional information. You can proceed and share us the details about what happens into the Mozambican side of Libombo border post, Resano Garcia.
Yes, we have a site which is for government, which is where is placed all the laws and where people can get all the information regarding to customs procedures inside MOS or regarding to Mozambique side, which is MCNet. Let me pass it as full it is, the link, the website. We got it from our revenue authority, which is AT.
Okay.
www.at.
All right.
.gov.mz.
Okay.
Yeah, this is for the revenue authority, which is the main board for internal revenues and customs officer. We call it it's our central. It is our central. Yeah, it's where it's called internal affairs and internal revenues collected and fiscal in fiscal control, and where is also part of it is customs side. We call it revenue authority. Autoridade Tributária de Moçambique. This is the correct name in Portuguese. The site is that one which I presented to you. Then the other one, which is regarding to where you got the old legislation, is www.mcnet.co.mz.
All right.
Then the other website is regarding to the internal system for traders, which is for traders. It's TradeNet.
All right.
.mcnet.
Yes.
.co.mz.
Wonderful.
Yeah. With these lines, with these websites, with these links, you can access all the information regard to customs and revenues authority inside Mozambique. The full legislation, all the packs regarding to restrictions, all legislations which are required for absorbing any special treatment, and all the protocol signage, they are all fitted inside these platforms, and they allow it for everyone. That is the point.
All right. Thank you very much. Is that all that you had to share? If there's something missing, you can just take 30 seconds to wrap up.
For me, it's like first to be thankful for the invitation. For really, we had to prepare something special as the first presentation was, but the invitation would have been like quicker. It wasn't an expecting invitation, so we couldn't be prepared to do something beautiful as it was presented before. And what we promise is that for next time we bring it at a PowerPoint presentation with full adjustments regarding to all operations. And we are here also to ask us to respond for any doubts regarding to a specific action which are taking place in our side and that they are not being understandable. I can do it properly and explain what is according to what is required for the regulation, where they are pointed or not pointed as a must.
All right. Thank you very much, Chief. We also have a comment from one of our travelers on the line, Tsepo Njolisi. He says, they understand you very clearly, Chief. He says he was in your country last month in Belen, and we love your country very much, beautiful. Thank you very much to the colleagues from Mozambique. And we will now move, and I will call on the floor our colleagues from CBRTA, Peter Meyer and Tracy Naiki. We'll also call on Stan Munchu from Tourism, if they can come on camera. Pema Silela from the Department of Health, as well as Stephen Fanel from Home Affairs. If colleagues, if you can come on camera. As our colleagues are coming on camera, thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Pam. It's beautiful, colleagues, to have you here. Waiting for Stan and for Stephen. So thank you very much. So as the colleagues are taking on the floor, part of what was touched earlier, and this refers to the circumstances in which we find ourselves in, was the protocols with regards to health requirements for traders and travelers, as well as how people should behave and the upkeep that pertains to such. And this in the main do affect people traveling through both modalities, whether it be air modality, land ports, as well as the marine. Now, I would like to give Pam an opportunity to make emphasis on some of the specific aspects that are important for people who are traveling from a health department perspective, be it returning citizens or those who are going out of the country. Pam?
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good evening to the senior managers and also the delegates and the attendees, and I thank you for the opportunity. I think Mr. Dlamini covered the entry requirements in terms of the Department of Health quite well, and I commend him for that. Just to add, Program Director, in terms of, and not necessarily to add, but to rather emphasize the test that is required. We have seen in recent weeks that there has been a level of confusion in terms of the type of test that is required for travelers that are entering the country. And I just would like to re-emphasize that South Africa is only accepting a negative PCR test result as a requirement when you enter the country. The antigen test will be conducted on arrival or on entry into the country if you are not in possession of a PCR. But the legislative requirement is that when you are coming into the country, you should be in possession of a negative PCR test result. So just to emphasize on that. And then just to also touch base on the frequent travelers, there is a provision on frequent travelers. And these are the travelers that travel through our borders, the South African borders, within a 14-day period. Their test result, the negative PCR test results that they present on entry remains valid for a period of 14 days. And this is after the initial entry into the country. So if you know that you are traveling in and out to the borders of the Republic on more than one occasion within a 14-day period, that PCR test result will be valid for a period of 14 days. And I must also emphasize that the 14 days starts from the day that you arrive into the country. So your first entry into the borders of the country, that test result must still be within the 72-hour time frame. Any subsequent travel following that, it can then be used for a period of 14 days. And the entry requirements are the same across all modalities, air, sea, and land ports of entry. So there is no differentiation in terms of the different types of modalities. And then just to also indicate that the travelers that are exiting will also be taken through screening so that we can determine that as you leave the country, you are not a risk to the country that you are going to be arriving in. And you will be required to complete what we call a traveler health questionnaire. This is also the case for those travelers that are entering the country. And the traveler health questionnaire, both for entry and exit, is available on the Department of Health website. So I would encourage the travelers to also download that so that when they come into the port, they already have that completed, and that will assist them also in terms of the processing times in the port environment. And I think, Chair, the rest of the other aspects have been covered quite in depth. Just as a close off to say, let's continue remaining safe. Let's continue implementing and complying with the non-pharmaceutical protocols, continue wearing our masks, sanitizing, and keeping social distance. The cases are going up, so I think we need to be extra cautious, and I will continue I would also encourage the delegates or persons who have not yet been vaccinated to do so, not only to protect ourselves, but to protect also our loved ones. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Pam, for making emphasis on such important things. But just before you go, I've got one question for you, which is coming from Nicolene Brand. Nicolene is asking, when do you start counting the 72 hours of the PCR test? Do you count it from the date the test is taken or from the time the results are printed?
So the 72 hours is counted from the date the test is taken. So it's from the date of sample collection. When you present yourself at a lab and they take the sample, that's when we start counting the 72 hours. So it's from the date that the test has been taken.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last one, okay, I think you have covered the aspect of the 14 days. So I think there is a question from Raidin Force who are saying, if you can clarify if guest comes to South Africa for vacation for less than 14 days, is he or she can they still use the same results if they return within 14 days? So is it correct?
Yes, it's correct, Chairperson. I must just emphasize that the first, because one of the areas where there was confusion is that travelers would assume that if they've taken a test, just make an example of maybe, okay, let me rather say if they've taken a test in a neighboring country 7 days before traveling, and they present that test on entering into South Africa, it's still within the 14 days, and they therefore assume that that test result will be valid. So the 14 days becomes valid if on initial, your first entry into a South African border, the test result is within the 72 hours. Any other subsequent travel, so you can travel out and you can travel back into South Africa and you can use the same test result.
Thank you very much. We appreciate Pam. I think the information is sufficient. We do have contact details for the DHA, which will be shared later after this session. And I will move to Stefan van Neel from Home Affairs and Immigration point of view. So I would like you to cover probably 2 or 3 things. One of those is if there are any specific requirements from DHA that pertains to foreign diplomats and returning to South Africa in terms of how they are treated. The second one, you may want to touch on people who are traveling with minors, minor children, as well as any other travel requirements and any other information we should deem sufficient and important to sensitize our travelers in this season and beyond.
Now, thank you very much, Program Director, and good evening to all. From the Department of Home Affairs, Immigration in particular, I would just maybe share 1 or 2 things with you and also focus on areas that you already identified. We know that South Africa had closed some of our ports of entry since last year in March, when we started dealing with the pandemic. The ports that we currently have operational are the ports that will remain so until after the festive season. And I can therefore just report that at the moment we have about 21 of our land borders that will be opened or that will remain open. About 4 of our airports will remain open, and then our maritime ports of entry. The smaller ports that have been closed for the last year and a half will remain so. We therefore request and appeal to the public that all of those travelers in the vicinity of those ports that are not open at the moment, get processed in ports like a closer or bigger operational port. So the closure of ports is one part. The second one that I would like maybe just to emphasize, Program Director, is the fact that South Africa still applies what we call a curfew regulation. And that is important to note because if you are entering or actually arriving at a port of entry and curfew is to be enforced from 12 o'clock until 4 o'clock, it will be not possible for officials at the port to process. The only provision that we have for movement after 12 o'clock is the movement of cargo. So you find, for instance, a port of entry like Beitbridge, that is a 24-hour operational port, but can only continue with operations of cargo movement from beyond midnight. And that is simply because we have not have any changes or amendments to the regulation around the curfew in South Africa. So I hope that is understood. Now, to some extent, will present some complexity because a port, for instance, like Osukungwenya, between ourselves and Eswatini, we know that movement operational hours might be extended, say, to 24 hours. But in the same way, we cannot allow movement of people beyond midnight simply to ensure that we comply with the curfew regulations. Chairperson, on your specific questions that you have asked, the first one is about how do we handle or how do we treat the foreign diplomats. We have not made any changes to any of our operational procedures. So it remains in the way that we've been doing all these years. And as far as I'm concerned, as head of ports of entry, I've not received any serious concerns from that sector that we need to do some changes to it. So we will continue in the same way. And with regards to the second question on the movement of minor children, we would obviously just focus on the South African nationals and those who are traveling out of the country. And the standard requirement remains. I mean, we've been dealing with this now since 2014. And I'm sure everyone public knows exactly what is that we need to do. There is not a lot of focus on foreign travelers because that's not really something that is applicable to them. But lastly, Chair, the appeal that I want to make to our travelers is that make sure that we are approaching now festive season, that you have valid travel documents when you arrive at the port of entry, that you do not facilitate or be facilitated by any person then the officials that are there to help you to get through the port of entry. It's important to note that we do not delay our travels to the closest to the festive dates. And what I mean by that, we should refrain of moving across, if possible, on the 23rd, 24th, because our borders gets extremely congested over those 2-3 days. And we do not want the frustration, like say, for instance, what we had last year at Beitbridge. And we also do not want to see what happened last year in Lebombo. So it is therefore our appeal. And for the truck industry, it's a difficult one, Chair, but a program director. But we always see that on the 24, 25, there is a serious competition on the road between our heavy duty vehicles with taxis as well as with smaller vehicles. And it's therefore our appeal that we will have to make sure that movement is well managed. And obviously we had engagements with traffic management, which obviously lead into our ports. And one of our key critical success factors that we have identified as part of our festive operational plan is that we like to see how we best manage our corridors into the ports of entry. I'm talking about the N1 between Messina and Beitbridge. I'm talking about the N4 between actually as far back as Malalan into Libombo. I'm talking about Lady Brandt, the N8 into Masiru Bridge. And lastly, I'm referring to the N17 into Osukungwenya. So Chairperson and Program Director, that is what we want to share with the public in terms of how do we prepare for the festive season, as well as the information that we have shared with everybody. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for such detailed info. I know time was not sufficient. You could have gone more and tell us more specifics, but we appreciate the detail that you have shared, and that our travelers will refer them to your website, which has got more than sufficient information, and we'll share the details later after the session. And before I come to Stan, who will take us through the developments and interesting aspects from the tourism perspective, the government initiatives, and many other things, I would like to talk to Tracy. Tracy, if you can share with us the role of CBRTA and what are your expectations to travelers, as well as vehicle and passenger vehicle operators. Over and above, you can take a few minutes, 3 or so, to just give us any nitty-gritties that our people should be aware of.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, yes. So from CBRTA, we are the Cross-Border Road Transport Agency, and we are the regulator for all the vehicles that goes across the borders. I think it is very important that the public would need to know that they need to have their permits on time. Issued applications should be submitted on time as well, so that they have all their documents prior and before they leave. I do have my colleague Peter Mayer with me, and he is from the Permits Division. I thought I brought him along so that he can also share what some of the important things to keep in mind when you're applying for the permits, and the period in which they are operating, so that he's able to also share the operating times and that of our office, so that everyone is able to apply on time and to get their permits on time as well. Also, in terms of the borders for passenger movement, it is still restricted, even with our counterparts on the other side. So passengers are basically moving only because they are returning home or under special circumstances. It's currently not open just for normal passenger movement. So yeah, let me invite Peter Mayer to maybe share some of the things that is important in terms of the permit side and the operating hours and the festive period that we have our own time period for the permit and application process. Thanks, Peter. Program Director, if you don't mind, if I can ask Peter to share that.
Yes,
with us.
Peter.
Thank you.
For sure. Just you can take a quick moment, a minute or so.
Good afternoon, Program Director. Yes, during this period, we issue additional permits due to the bigger volumes of movement of passengers to our neighboring countries. So it's quite a busy period for us in the office. So we ask all our operators to come early to submit the applications. We are open during this period. We are also open between Christmas and New Year. We're going to issue additional permits from the 6th of December until the 16th of January. This is to allow additional permits to be issued to passenger operators that want to travel back to their countries. Also important to note that people must have the correct documentation with them, and also that all commercial vehicles that's going to cross the border needs a cross-border permit. Also, the permits are issued for specific route descriptions. It indicates the border posts that they must travel through. And also goods permits are only issued to commercial border posts because they need to declare all the goods before they travel through the border.
Still the same,
Thank
Baba.
you. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you very much for that info. Thank you, the CBRTA colleagues. And on that note, Stan Muncho, you can take a floor. I've got 2 minutes for you.
Thank you very much, Program Director and the colleagues. I'm excited to be here and to take you through some of the programs that we have for the Department of Tourism. Stan Munsu, as the Program Director, has introduced me. I'm concerned with tourism safety, and the reason why we are concerned with tourism safety is because for every person who's going to travel, the first point of call, or the first concern for them will be, is the destination that I'm going to safe for me. And I think it goes with anybody of us that whenever we go to any other country, we'll firstly check if that particular country is safe. And that will then inform our decision in whether going there or not. So what is it that we have done to ensure that as South Africa, we have developed what is called the tourism safety strategy. And this tourism safety strategy is basically centered upon 3 key pillars. And then I think that is to ensure that when a person goes to an embassy of South Africa, whether it's in Mozambique or Eswatini, before they make the application, they can be able to be ensured that there are mechanisms in place that will ensure their safety when they land. But then also there's responsive measures, and the responsive measures are mainly used when there is an unlikely event of incident that would have happened. And then that the importance for that is that there should be a quick and effective turnaround, because we all know that the tourists have limited time in the country. Also, there's aftercare programs that helps when a tourist is injured, incapacitated, they cannot speak, but then also contacting the embassies in South Africa in case their documentation have been lost, so that then they can be able to be connected, the documents can be able to be recovered, so that then they can be able to travel back home. Another thing that we have done as the department is to sign an MOU with the SAPS, because they are the custodian of safety in our country, and an action plan has been developed in that regard. And then the action plan also touched on some of the issues, part of it being the tourism monitors program that we are implementing across the country. These are our tourism monitors. They are identified next to the attractions, and then they are trained and they are deployed. This is how they are dressed. And then in our country, they are spread across the country, and you will see with the number there that it is a huge number. It's around 2.5 of them, and they are also deployed in the borders. And I think part of what Stephen was talking about, the inflow and the huge traffic that is there, they are also able to help us. We have launched some of them at the OR Tambo International Airport and also at Cape Town International Airport as well. So I think visibility for us is very important to ensure that when the tourists come to our country, at least they are ensured that there are those people that will be able to take care of them when they are here. We give them, proper training to ensure that they are able to do what is required of them, part of it being crowd management, crime prevention, also COVID-19 protocols. Also, it is important that they are able to be aware of that, so that they can impart that particular knowledge to the tourists whenever they interact with them. But then also, I think the other most important thing is to ensure that they do not just become tools or mechanism to prevent the tourists from any incidences, but then to ensure that they are safe themselves. So we want them to be safe. We don't want to fall into issues that will harm their lives when they are trying to impart their duties to the tourists. As part of our partnership with the SAPS, we are talking about the establishment of the tourist police capacity. So this is still in an infant stage, but then it's going to be modeled around the diplomatic police. So it is not necessarily going to be the building of new police station, but then it's going to be more or less like branches that are going to be developed within the police stations that are existing. We're still looking into that. There's an inquest that has been done already. And I think not very long we'll be having a report on that. And the reason why we're still looking at that is because it will have some financial implications. So I think we're looking at that, and then we're excited. Case management also, that is also one of the systems that we're working with the SAPS. At this stage, when the police register a criminal case, they do not make a distinction on whether this is for a tourist or this is for sort of yes, the nationality may come there. And I think this is a concern for us, because we are not able to get a database of how many tourists are attacked in our country, so that we can then reach a proper statistics, so that then we can be able to deploy and allocate resources optimally. So I think that is something that we are working. The systems is actually currently being changed, and we're looking at least by the end of the year, it will be able to capture all the necessary profile of the tourists, so that then they can be able to know where we can be able to work. Fast-tracking the cases involving the tourists, that is also important, because the tourists have limited time in our country. We have spoken with the NPA and say, can we go back and perhaps establish the course that we did in 2010? They said, no, not necessarily, but then what we can do, we can allocate the deputy directors of public prosecution in different provinces that you can be able to work with. The magistrates are going to be on standby during the festive season, and then those people are going to be able to help us during the festive season. But then there are cases which will not necessarily reach conclusion during the festive season for one reason or the other. It could be that the tourist is injured, they cannot be able to speak, or for whatever reason they were involved in an accident. And then in that regard, the tourist will still be able to go home, because the reality is that when you are involved in an incident, you just want to go home as quickly as possible. So in that regard, the virtual court proceedings that were implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic will also be considered. And how they're going to be used is that perhaps a tourist can go to the South African embassy in Brazil or in another country, and then a proceeding can then be taken. So I think you will see now there's a linkage between NPA, Justice, and the Department of International Relations that is going to take place in that regard. The aftercare program that I talked about, the Thuthuzela centers are there for aftercare program for victims that will need assistance, especially if they become the victims of rape. So these are the mechanisms that we have put into place to say, should there be an incident, we want to ensure that the tourists are safe. But then more than anything for us, we want to prevent. We don't want to get to a situation where we react or we respond. So our first point of action is to prevent any situation, because when you prevent a situation, it is less costly. And I think that is where we want to go. We've got awareness programs that we're going to be doing, and we're going to see that we're going to be visible, and our principals are going to be involved in these areas and ensuring that they work with us. We're going to work in partnership with other departments as well, just to ensure that we amplify the voice around the tourism safety. Already our tourism safety tips are part of my SAPS app, which is also very important. So when you land in our country and then you download my SAPS app, you are going to be able to see the safety tips that are going to guide you on what to do and what not to do. So we are excited, and I think this is very important to us, because when tourists are safe and when they continue to come to our country, they boost our economy. The jobs are being created, and poverty is being alleviated. So I think this is a very important cause for us, and I think we call upon everyone from the departmental side to lend a helping hand, but then we also call upon the tourists that when they come, they become vigilant. They do not necessarily go where the signs are saying they should not go. Some of the incidences that we've had is, for example, is tourists falling over the mountains, over the cliffs, because they just want to take a selfie. They want to be on top of or take direction or go where they're not supposed to go. So I think we also appeal in that regard to say, yes, there are mechanisms in place, but then where you are directed not to go, please do not go, because there's a reason why you are directed not to go where you're not supposed to go. But then overall, we're looking forward to a beautiful, festive season filled with experiences that when people go back home, they will be able to go back home and tell other people to say, go back to South Africa, because it's a beautiful and safe destination. And that is very important to us for that value chain that I have mentioned. So I think that would be the little from me, Chairperson, and I'm thankful for this platform.
Thank you very much, Stan Munchu. Indeed, tourism safety is key and instrumental in ensuring that the tourism sector flourishes. But over and above that, the people should enjoy their leisure time in comfort. We have also learned that there is MySEPS app, which people can download, not only tourists, even locals, in order to stay abreast and also to be able to report cases and incidences speedily and be able to trace them. Thank you very much, and we appreciate. We will move to as we move towards closure, I want to welcome the following colleagues into the fore, and that is Marshall Mutepe is a manager from Beitbridge Border Post. Piet van der Westhuizen, a manager from Lebombo Border Post, that is a border to Mozambique. Commander Paul Law from OR Tambo, representing the air modality. There's Marshall, you can see him on the screen. We also have Laikim Rauzi. Laikim Rauzi is from SARS, the VAT Export Incentive Scheme. She manages the VAT refunds process for travelers. We also welcome Commander Naidu from Durban, from the C modality. He's also joined by Lyndon. I think much of the questions have already been dealt with, but a quick one, and I will quickly put you like on the spotlight. It's about travelers who see VAT refunds as a scheme of raising money. Pumlani Blose, I welcome you. And to say, what are the aspects that you would like to advise to travelers who are, because we have heard about a number of incidences about travelers who are found being involved in fraudulent VAT refund activities. What is your advice? But when you deal with that, there is also a concern about travelers and tourists who buy goods from the country and they take time to claim. What happens if they exceed the allocated 90 days?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Good evening, colleagues. Good evening to the listeners. I'll just start with a brief background of the VAT Export Incentive Scheme, which is a VAT refund that the South African government has given the mandate to the South African Revenue Services to administer in terms of the VAT regulation number 316. The VAT refund process, it is outlined on the VAT regulation. The responsibilities for the qualifying purchaser, they are stated as follows. The qualifying purchaser is expected to come into our country, buy the goods, and then ensure that they've got tax invoices with them when they export the goods out of the country. During the exportation of the goods, in terms of the regulation, it needs to be done within 90 days from the date of the tax invoice. After exportation, then the qualifying purchaser is expected to submit the claim for the refund within 90 days from the date of the exportation of the goods. The goods, I'm talking about movable goods. The refund is only applicable to the movable goods, no refunds on services. Therefore, after this exportation, then the submission can be done with our VAT refund administrator, which is the tax refund. The contacts for the tax refund was previously shared by Bongani on the presentation. The submission can be done either by post, it can be hand delivered to the office of the tax refund, which is located in Kempton Park. And then the claimant can also communicate directly with the VAT refund administrators, and then they have a mutual agreement of where can they collect those claims for them. And then in terms of the claims, once they've been submitted to the VAT refund administrators, the refund administrators then submit the claims to SARS for an audit verification. During the process of audit verification, there are a number of processes that we follow. And then once it's found that your claim that has been submitted, it is fraudulent or there's some sort of non-compliance, investigations are conducted and there are consequence management that have been followed, as previously explained by my colleague Bongani, that you might find yourself in a situation where you have to pay a customs penalty, or you can even find yourself to an extent of being criminally charged for submitting fraudulent claims by submitting all those fraudulent invoices to the scheme. Remember, the refund process here, it's an incentive scheme. And by an incentive scheme, we're saying that we're trying to meet our travelers halfway. It's not a get quick rich scheme. We're just trying to make sure that our tourists, our travelers who are coming to our beautiful country, they are at least being met halfway by not having or being subjected to double taxation in terms of the goods that they procure in our country, and then they export them out of the Republic of South Africa. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like, we appreciate your comprehensive response. And then I will ask Piet van der Wezen to take us through this to say, we are nearing the festive season, and we know there is an experience of an influx of travelers through ports of entry, and the same applies to people who are traveling across many land ports, Beitbridge included. What are the plans that customs have so far, and what tips do you give to travelers who will be going in and out of Mozambique, the same as those who could be going to any other neighboring countries?
Thank you, Program Director, and good evening to everyone, all the listeners. I think from a Lebombo perspective, some of the tips that I can give to potential travelers is to try and avoid the border post, specifically the Lebombo border post from the period which we deem to be ultra peak periods, which would be around about the 21st to the 25th of December, where we experience a large number of travelers, specifically returning resident mine workers, which then creates huge bottlenecks, specifically at the port itself, although plans that we have already put in place, and which is an annual occurrence, is that vehicles processing happens at a facility 7 kilometers away from the port, where these influx of high volumes of travelers are then processed and escorted through the border post through a one-stop process, where we do have co-location with our Mozambique counterparts, where we then do a one-stop processing process to try and ease the congestion on the main corridor, as Mr. Van Niel has alluded to earlier. So then that ensures that we do not have any major bottlenecks at the port itself, which normally creates a challenge for travelers coming into the country, as well as obviously there's congestion. We've also implemented a process of implementing alternative routes for cargo bearing vehicles, which will then be diverted off the main corridor and will be diverted to alternative routes and then join the N4 closer to the border post, and as well as then also ensuring that the area between the border post and what we refer to the Komatipoort intersection remains clear and open, which also then eases the burden on residents within the local town of Komatipoort to then move freely. The co-location with Mozambique it's very helpful in the sense that because we have the co-location in place, we then have a one-stop process, which then ensures that the bulk of travelers get processed away from the border post. We've also ensured, as Mr. Van Niel also alluded to earlier, the huge congestion that we had last year over the festive period. We've also increased our capacity on the port health side of things to ensure that we have sufficient capacity within the port of entry to ensure that we can process as many travelers as possible in the shortest time, to ensure that we move as many people as possible and try to prevent that. Just a request is to ensure that travelers are safe along the N4 corridor, specifically in and around the Komatipoort area, is to be very vigilant in terms of the amount of heavy loaded vehicles, trucks passing through the port, as we know that the economy is dependent on our exports as well, to make sure that they are vigilant and make sure that they stay safe on the corridor itself. I think also our CBRTA colleagues alluded to the fact that the cargo processes are not halted during this process or the festive season period. So just a reminder to our colleagues who will be traveling to Mozambique and from Mozambique to please be vigilant and ensure that they keep themselves safe on the N4. Thank you, Mr. Director.
Thank you very much. And maybe equally so, I will ask Mr. Mtepe just to give us a highlight in terms of any precautions for travelers going through Beitbridge during this festive season.
Thank you, Mr. Program Director, and together with the facilitator, and everyone. In terms of during the peak period in Beitbridge, the precaution which I can give to our travelers is that they must not go to anyone if they need assistance. They must go straight to the office. It's either they visit the office of SARS or also visit the immigration office, because around the vicinity, there are people who are acting as customs officer or immigration officer, who then rob the clients to say, if there is a queue, they can say, give me your passport. I will help you. I will go and stamp the passport for you very quick. Give me so much, which I will go and give the officer. And in turn, they go into the toilet, stamp the passport with a fake stamp, and go and hand it over to the client. The client goes. When the client comes back, immigration then detect that the stamp which has been used during departure was a fake stamp. The client will be penalized and banned for 5 years not to come back to South Africa. That is a precaution which I'm giving to our travelers. And
Thank you
during
very much.
the peak period, we do change our plans. Our operation plan is also the same as what Pete said. We have created our area where we clear our light vehicles and the buses. We don't mix them in order to avoid congestion inside the border. By doing so, the trade of the facilitation of movement runs smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you, Komora Mnarini, for the highlights that you have shared in terms of the precautions that traders and travelers should be aware of. We wish we had more time. We could, pay more attention on certain specifics, but I want to move quickly as we wrap up. Paul, mainly to the travelers now who come through the airport with luxurious goods and high-valued products, what are some of the necessities that they need to pay attention to from a customs perspective?
Evening, Mr. Director, and to our listeners. It's important where a traveler is unsure and is in doubt as to what his allowances are, that he approaches the customs officer who is on duty to assess whether his goods are within his allowance. Now, especially regular travelers, or travelers that travel multiple times within a 30-day cycle and who do bring in a lot of high-value goods, it's important that those travelers register with customs and apply for a customs code, which they can do on our website with our licensing and registration division. And then once they have obtained and been issued with a customs code, they need to submit a formal declaration to customs clear their goods, which is then submitted by a clearing agent on behalf of the trader. And the declaration is then sent to one of our hubs. Once the release notification is granted, the goods are released. So pending the actual release of the goods are detained temporarily by customs. And once the trader has then obtained the release notification, they will then come back to customs to obtain the goods. But it's important that where a traveler is unsure or not certain, and he has possible commercial goods in his possession, that he proceeds to a customs officer who will then do an assessment on what the traveler has in his possession. And if the traveler is found to be within his allowance and the goods are non-commercial, he'll be allowed to proceed. If he's exceeded the allowance, then an assessment would be done or the goods would be detained in the port of entry. Thank you, Mr. Director.
Thank you very much, Paul. As also indicated, if we had more time, we could deal a lot more with any other additional info in terms of what happens when you travel through the air modality or through the airports. But just before we close, we have noted that our colleagues, especially within the SACU, they normally have double residencies between one country and another. And this also leads to sharing of assets such as vehicles. And at times they get in trouble with the law enforcement. Mr. Blose, if you can take just a minute to advise people in terms of especially the usage of vehicles. We have seen residents from Lesotho with families in South Africa, equally so Swaziland, South Africa, and Botswana. What should they consider if they want to use those vehicles permanently or most of the times in the country?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mukeri and the listeners in this session. I believe it is important to share the short analysis of what took place before these vehicles could not be registered in South Africa. A case took place in 2007 where a ban was upheld by the Supreme Court of Appeal on its second-hand imported vehicles. And the case was, the respondent of that case was the MEC for transport at that time, Begicele and SARS. And SARS stopped issuing permits for those vehicles to travel in South Africa on the road, but to be carried out of the country and until they got registered in the foreign other African countries. So those vehicles can only come into the country provided they meet the requirements of RSA. So if somebody then is married, for argument's sake, to a gentleman in South Africa from Swaziland, and they decided to move and stay in South Africa, the correct procedure is that that vehicle must be declared through customs, and the requirements for that vehicle to be declared at customs, amongst others, is to get the import permit. What happens in that if the vehicle was originally manufactured in South Africa, then a letter of authority will be issued by ITAC. But if the vehicle was not originally manufactured in South Africa, having applied for the import permit, ITAC division will request the vehicle to be tested and brought into the country and check if it qualifies to be driven on our country, which may also lead to the proof of the duties if they were paid on initial arrival in the country destined for other African countries. Hence, it is a challenge if a vehicle is found being driven by a South African, whereas it's foreign registered. And the reason for that is to protect the economy of the country, including the fact that within the SACO space, only South Africa has got the industries that manufactures vehicles. That is why the second-hand imported vehicles are only allowed to go through outside South Africa. Those are requirements that anybody who is a South African driving a foreign registered vehicle will meet the mighty arms of the law if it's not been adhered to the declaration procedures by customs and other government agencies in the process. Maybe the last one, GM, is just to state that customs deal with the consignment. We are not worried whether people are married or not, but we deal with the vehicle that is in the country, either illegally or legally. So I submit and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mkulu. And the last one, Commander Naidu and Linton. People are making plans to travel, to go cruise on the vessels in the high seas, but some are not sure whether going into a cruise, you are still regarded to be in the country, and what are the expectations when people go cruising, and what information should they pay attention to? David, you can unmute the mic.
Thank you, Program Director, for the question. So cruising is, and the seaports are very much like the airports and everything that we have discussed. So normal regulations are carried out and normal duties and VAT are paid. So if you cruise and if you do not leave our territorial waters, it's considered, as in the airports, a domestic flight or a domestic travel in this place. So therefore, you would not be able to collect those specific allowances that are allowed to passengers traveling abroad. So if you travel from, for example, Durban to Cape Town, and it's just a cruise from one port to the other, and if you do buy, for example, duty-free goods, even if they are within the normal allowances, you would be required to pay the duties and VAT on those items. That is the quick answer, sir. And thank you.
All right, thank you. And Lyndon, any obligations that may pertain either to the captain of the ship or to the conduct of travelers, and any other information you want to add, I can give you the last minute as you wrap up the conversation.
Thank you, Program Director, and good evening to all the viewers. The regulations that apply to the travelers also apply to the crew and captains on board vessels. So they also have to comply with to ensure that they are within the allowances that is prescribed. If I can maybe just highlight something in terms of the cruise line season that will be launched in Durban on and around the 6th of December. For all travelers who are wishing to travel on the cruises, please ensure that you allow enough travel time to be able to get to your vessel timelessly, since the city of Durban is undergoing quite a major infrastructure repair on our roads. So there might be some delays that might be experienced. So just give yourself enough travel time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lyndon, and thank you very much to my panel. It brings us to the end of our Q&A and the discussions around all matters pertaining to travelers as well as small business traders. In another session, we'll cover more details as well with regards to those who are specifically involved in trade across borders. We also note that the aspects that have been raised by our colleagues from the Department of Tourism also has more interest of the women involved in cross-border trade at heart. And similarly so, from the South African Revenue Service, we believe that it is important that we have biased intentions that seeks to improve and protect the interests of women and children traders and travelers that go across our ports of entries. And all necessary precautions, we try and make sure that indeed they receive the necessary support. We are doing more work around that to ensure that also our women traders, they get simplified processes, more capacity building, as well as support. We will share more details with you in our social media with regards to work around that space. And to the colleagues who are involved in the travel industry, for example, we have Jenny Kutlu, we have seen your questions. We ask that you use the emails that have been provided to engage with us so that we can send you more details which you can share with your travelers. That is with regards to the visa requirements for Mozambique and any other safety information and any additional information. We have taken note of your questions. We thank you, Raidin, Nicolene. The details have been provided. If you've got follow-up questions to any of the departments that were here, please use the information that has been provided. We thank you and we appreciate you. Thank you very much. That is it from my side. Back to you, Program Director.
Thank you very, very much, colleagues, and to our OGAs that have covered all the information that I'm sure all our stakeholders would have had and all the questions that they might have had. We are so grateful for the information that we have gained today. Especially on my side, I mean, it was so informative. I don't think I took my eyes off the screen because it was so much information, relevant information to what we have come to do. Before we move on to our closing remarks by Mr. Thamsanqa Mabandla, I just want to highlight an African proverb that we picked up a couple of months ago, and I found it to be extremely profound, where it talks about a three-cord rope. It says that a three-cord rope is the strongest rope that builds things together, so it cannot be easily broken. So it may not be as thick as others, but it cannot be easily broken. I'm reminded of that as we have come together, different OGAs, different sectors, our stakeholders are here. In fact, it is an absolutely amazing, amazing experience to be in. And we thank and commend our leadership for having such platforms for us to be able to engage and empower the public at large. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Thamsanqa Mabandla, and I'm going to proceed in reading his bio. Thank you very much, team. Mr. Thamsanqa Mabandla is a senior manager at SARS. He joined the organization in 2004 and as a stakeholder relationship manager. Throughout his time at SARS, he has occupied various roles and functions. His current role includes the facilitation and coordination of taxpayer and trader education. Over to you, Mr. Mabandla.
Thank you, Program Director, for this opportunity. I want to thank everybody on behalf of the organizers of this session. It's truly been an absorbing and a very informative session. I hope that the session has actually provided the necessary clarity and certainty for travelers and their requirements. And to us, we are very grateful that you have joined us throughout this session. And with those words, I would like to say thank you and good evening. But back to you, Program Director.
Thank you, Thamsanqa. That was sweet and short, to the point, just exactly how we like it here at SARS. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of this beautiful and informative session. I would like to remind you that before you log off, please kindly fill in the survey that is presented to you. You'll find that before you leave this platform, you will be prompted to a screen that will lead you to our survey. Kindly give us feedback, give us honest feedback, and we will use it because this is not the end of the journey. There's still more webinars that we have after this one. But I do appeal to the powers that be to kindly maybe have another one of this nature, because I find that there is a lot that we had to cut off just to ensure that we respect your time, ladies and gentlemen, which is very special to and precious to all of us. So hence, we appeal to the powers that be to have a similar session in the near future. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the webinar. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.